Heto ang Oragon Internet Television. Maaasahan sa balanced news in public affairs, education, music and information gamit ang makabagong teknolohiya sa pamamahayag. Maaasahan sa katotohanan, kaagapay ng mamamayan sa pagkikipag-ugnayan sa pamahalaan. Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting.
Magandang umaga po mga kaibigan. Pag sinabi pong halalan, politika, ito po ang nagiging aspirin ng bayan. Bakit kanyo? Sapagkat nalilimutan ng taong bayan ang mga problemang kinakaharap ng ating lipunan. Masakit man pong aminin, subalit ito ang kaligayahan ng mga Pilipino na makita yung mga gustong maging Pangulo, pakalawang Pangulo, maging Senador, o di kaya ay Congressman, Gobernador down the line, na umaawit at sumasayaw sa tanghalan. Hindi ko ma-imagine yung mga naging top-ranking government officials sumasayaw ng cha-cha sa entablado, umaawit, may nagpapatawa kahit kahit hindi kalbo, at na-elect. So we'd like to find out what's going on sa ating lipunan at nahahalal ang mga ito. Meron ba silang kakayahan in the first place? Do they have what it takes to lead a country? Aside from motherhood statements, can they go deeper into that and find out what's going on and what could be done? Maganda po pag-usapan ito sapagkat hindi po biro ang ating kinalalagyan ngayon. Sa Estados Unidos, pinag-uusapan yung pandemya at yung pagtanggi ng isang Pangulo na tanggaping siya ay natalo sa halalan. Sa Pilipinas, wala namang ganon. Dahil dito, sabi nga nila, hindi pa man nag-ieleksyon, alam na kung sino ang nananalo. And for so many reasons. However, may mga pagkakataon na talagang nakagugulat ang mga nagaganap. Before I introduce our panel, I'd like to welcome our good friend Ariel Civilino of the Philippine Press Institute for his opening remarks. Ariel?
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Magandang umaga, Kuya Melo. Wherever you are, I hope you're all safe and let's continue to keep praying for ourselves and for others and for this country. Welcome to the 5th edition of this monthly roundtable. We've had pretty good discussions in the last 4 monthly roundtables. This time we're focusing on the elections. PPI thought that with elections just around the corner, it's about time that we highlight preparations for the elections. In fact, in our planning last week, we thought of voters' education for campuses in the next training programs of the PPI in 2021. Having said that, we'd like to thank Hans Seidel Foundation for this opportunity to bring these discussions to the fore so that not only media practitioners can benefit from it, but also our other stakeholders, especially the public. Having said that, also, we also would like to plug that there is a website of the PPI that focuses on the pandemic stories. That's www.ppinewscommons.net, wherein you can find a lot of stories on the COVID-19, which Hans Seidel Foundation is also supporting. Please welcome our very good friend who's supporting this roundtable and other projects of the PPI. Please welcome the resident representative to the Philippines of the Hans Seidel Foundation, Attorney Guts Heineke, who will also be part of the panel. Maraming salamat po.
Gets? Good
Yes.
morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Ariel. Good morning, Melo. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Kurt Heinecke. I'm the resident representative of the German Hans Seidel Foundation. And we are proud and we are happy that we are partner of the Philippine Press Institute because the overall objective of the Hans Seidel Foundation is to build up democracy and good governance. We are in the Philippines already for 40 years. And when we talk about democracy, good governance, and you see it already in this conference here today, then we should talk about journalism as well, because the journalists are key player in order to inform the citizens, the public, about what's going on, how is the country developing, and on everything. And therefore, that's already the background why we are happy to support the PPI and why we are thankful that we have got this wonderful partnership, Ariel. Thank you very much. And of course, next year we will really start and have hopefully some real activities as well, not only online activities. And good morning. Thank you very much.
All right. Mga kaibigan, ang mga panauhin po natin ay mga dalubhasa sa pagsusuri ng ating lipunan. Ang pagkadalubhasa ay tungkol sa datos, sa statistics, at tungkol sa lipunan. Magkakaroon din tayo ng perspective mula sa ibang bansa kung ano ang nagaganap sa kanila. We've invited Director James Arthur B. Jimenez of the Commission on Elections. Siya po ang Director ng Information and Education Department at siya rin tagapagsalita ng COMELEC. I expect him to join us any minute now. Si Gets Heinecke, ang Resident Representative to the Philippines ng Hans Seidel Foundation. Siya po ay isang abogado at nakapaglingkod na rin sa iba't ibang kapasidad sa ibang bansa. Nagkaroon na siya ng pagkakataong makapaglakbay at ngayon na sa Pilipinas. At tulad ng binanggit niya, sinusulong ang tungkol sa kahalagahan ng demokrasya. Maganda pong pag-usapan din ito. Si Dr. Mario J. Aguja is the President of the Philippine Sociological Society at isang profesor sa Mindanao State University. We're also joined by Professor George Villamor or J.B. Tigno. Siya po'y board member ng Social Weather Stations at profesor ng Sociology sa CSSP sa UP Diliman, the best university in Diliman. And of course, our good friend, Carmelita Bobby Iricta. Siya po ang Pangulo ng Novo Trends at dating Civil Registrar General at Administrator ng National Statistics Office. Inanyayahan ko po si Bobby to join us sapagkat meron din silang ginawang pag-aaral some time ago kung ano ba yung mga katangian ng mga inaakala ng mga botanteng magagaling na maging pinuno ng bansa. Yung mga members po ng PPI at mga kaibigan ko na tumugon doon sa survey, it's an informal survey na anong qualities ang hinahanap ng mga mamamayan sa isang leader ang siya po nating binigyan ng pagkakataon. So we will be asking Bobby about their study, and then of course social weather stations will also be asked ano yung mga sistema to find out ano ang pulso ng ating mga kababayan. Maganda po ito. Let's start with the President of the Philippine Sociological Society, si Professor Mario Aguja. Tell us about your views about Philippine society today. Magandang araw po, Professor, and welcome.
Ay, magandang umaga, Milot. Magandang umaga sa mga kasama natin sa panel at sa lahat ng nakikinig sa atin. Isang mapayapang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Kalinaw kaninyong tanan. Ay tama na napakaingay na actually ng eleksyon sa Pilipinas. As usual, no? I think Professor Tigno will always agree kung mahaba yung Pasko sa atin, tayo rin yung may pinakamahabang eleksyon, no? Whether yung kampanya which is a 90 days o 45 days or yung preparasyon sa eleksyon, halos isang taon din yan, no? Yung sa Pilipinas, I always say na maraming yung characteristics natin sa Pilipinas. Una, yung ating characteristic na pampolitika, it remains to be an elite democracy. It's a system of governance where the elite continue to govern and continue to reign. I think napakaganda nung paper halimbawa na ginawa ng nila Professor Mendoza ng Ateneo, na sinasabi nila na while hindi yung relasyon na halimbawa ng mga political dynasties in the Philippines at saka mga lugar na mahihirap. So yun yung una. Pangalawa ay napakataas pa rin ng inequality sa Pilipinas. I think our pollster here will tell us that despite what government will tell us about the numbers, when you look at the ground, poverty remains very, very visible for many of our kababayans on the ground. And as we all know, income is one of the most difficult thing to measure in this country. Now, if you ask people how much they earn, they either will not tell you or they hesitate to tell you about income in this country. Then third, yung politika natin, our politics, the crisis of Philippine politics is not new. No? Nandiyan na yan, matagal na yan eh. Yung economic crisis natin, ulit-ulit yan. No? There's a cycle of it. But what is emerging new today in the Philippines that is reflected in our electoral system, there's a new emerging crisis. No? At in sociology, we call it, there is a crisis of hope. No? When you have a long problem of economics and politics, people don't expect a substantive change will happen. Now, in sociology, we sometimes call it a culture of poverty and a poverty of culture. When you get used to this kind of system, no, of election, then we always say that, ganun din naman yung mangyayari ng election na yan. So what's really new? No, nakasanayan na. And that lives in the minds of many people. So in the coming election, if we have to look, Melo, I could say that there are probably 4 kinds of Filipinos in the coming election. One, the active citizens. These are people, whatever happens in this country, they believe in our democratic exercise. They believe that people really have to make the right choices in putting in the best candidate in our election. No. But they remain to be in the minority. These are the advocates of good governance, and active citizenship. Then the second is basically you have the believers. These are the loyalists. Loyalists to political parties, loyalists to ideologies, or loyalists to personalities. Good or bad, they will embrace those. This comes from whether the leader is a populist or not, but they create different segments, Then the third one that we have in this country is basically you have people that always look at the election in terms of the patronage it offers. No? Sabi mo nga yung election natin ay aspirin ng bayan, other way of describing Philippine election is a fiesta. It's an opportunity for everybody at a single time. No? Maingay, masaya, pero maiksi siya. Natatapos lang din agad siya diyan, no? There are many of our kababayans, you like it or not, because of the political culture that has been developed, election is a source of patronage. It's where people receive free t-shirts. It's where people receive free groceries. It's where people receive cash from the politician they voted that never returned to them after the election. No. So, yung mga short-term na pangangailangan na tinutugunan nila. Then, lastly, syempre, meron din tayong mga kababayan na hindi talaga makakaboto kahit sila ay registered voters kasi yung bansa natin, for one reason or the other, mahirap magrehistro. No? It's very, very inconvenient, Tapos, nandyan pa yung immersed in there in the political culture na kailangang hakutin. No? Para i-rehistro yung mga tao. Parang sa eleksyon, kailangang hakutin yung mga tao para dalahin sa presinto. So, that creates that kind of culture, and we still have a lot of disenfranchised voters during election time. No, I think especially this coming time because if I actually have a short PowerPoint sana, but Ma'am Bobby is here. If you look at our census in 2015, napakalaki nung young population natin, and many of them, yung mga 14 years old na yan ay buboto na at ito yung K-12 generation. malapad yan, pero karamihan ng mga yan hindi nakarehistro. No? And students, because they are the techie guys, they thought that things are very easy to do electronically. They could not imagine lining up, for the whole day to COMELEC offices just to be registered. And I think it is something that we have to do something. Then lastly, of course, we still have the structural problems. Melo, no? And in Mindanao, we always say we continue to be the land of the lords. No, you have the warlords, you have the landlords, you have the drug lords, all participating in a democratic exercise. No, and eventually they use basically at their dispensation the guns, goons, and gold. Continue to be there. If you know, I've been a observer of elections on the ground. No, it's very interesting in areas where you have violent conflict on the election day, where people are scared to go to the voting precinct, are usually areas also which you have a very high turnout of voters. Diba? Interesting, no? May bakbakan, maaga pa lang may bakbakan that scares people to go to the precinct, and yet you still have very, very high turnout of voters. And people are asking, bakit? Simple lang, pag hindi na pumunta yung mga botante natin, dahil electronic naman tayo, pwede mo na i-feed lahat ng ballots doon sa machine. You don't need the people to be around because the machine will accept it anyway. There are no watchers. It's easy to manipulate. And that happens in the area. I observed that in many instances in the area. Then, of course, the culture of poverty interface with this one. No? Kaya, yun yung napakalaking challenge ng ating election, while people are still hopeful that election will bring change. No? I'm not sure whether they are hopeful that it will bring really development that they would like to imagine with. And given the kind of candidates we have in the elections, they have to dance, It's like a fiesta. It's colorful. There are singers, there are dancers. It's noisy. It entertains people basically. Unlike, I think in Germany, probably in the Western world, election is quite boring, because you don't have those kind of entertainments. And they talk of platforms. In here, you don't talk of platforms. No, because the political parties remain and continue to be very weak in this country. We had hope.
Professor,
no? Yes,
Professor,
sorry. Yes.
let me just ask you, are there still political parties in the Philippines when it's even worse than civic clubs? Because you can change from one party to the other. It's as good as changing your Rotary pin to a Lions Club pin to Iwanis pin, no? Or changing shirts. So what political parties are we talking about?
Yes. Well, actually, you just have networks. No? Political parties are important during election as source of funds. Because especially when you have a presidential election, you align with the president, which is always expected to have money to distribute down to the local level. So you join the party then. No? But in terms of ideology, I think it does not exist in the Philippines. Well, there were small political parties that tried to be, but they are already out in the political landscape in the Philippines. No, like the party list. No, the party list started to be a very ideal platform. That they base on ideology, on platforms. The poor are running in there. But when suddenly you look at the party list now, they are also governed by dynasties and the rich one. I do not know how Regis Romero represents the country, for example, or the son, for example, of Gloria Macapagal Arroyo that represents a security guard in 2007.
Okay. All right. And we're just beginning, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes. I'll end on that. I know the rest will be talking a lot.
Of course.
Really an exciting one. Thank you very much.
This is an exciting exchange. From UP Diliman, Professor JB, what are your views about Philippine society? Are we breeding a culture of politicians who want to keep people poor so that come election time, 1,000 pesos would suffice to change the political landscape? Good morning, Professor.
Morning. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Maraming salamat, Melo, for asking SWS to speak here, asking me to give a short talk on this question of the attitudes of Filipino voters, in fact. SWS has done a lot of surveys concerning the attitudes of Filipino voters, no? And how these attitudes can impact on the results and the conduct of the elections. No? Actually, is it okay if I
Yes.
present
Okay.
some slides here?
Yes,
These are just
please.
10 slides actually. 10 slides lang ito, full of tables. So they are going to be short presentations.
Yes, please.
Let me just, okay.
Okay.
I can't seem to find here. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm not used to these. Can you see the lights now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
About what Filipinos want
Yes.
and why we're not surprised. Okay. Let me preface this with maybe 2 or 3 points. No, I'll be using World Values Survey data on the Philippines at 3 time points. No, 2001, 2012, and 2019 in order to situate, the context, the time frame, no, for these. I mean, because attitudes change. They're not fixed. And these surveys are done by SWS as well. No? To be honest, I've been trying to organize my thoughts on this particular topic in my head for some time now. Ever since the Pulse Asia came out with an approval rating, no, of the president in September of about 91%. Okay, despite, or maybe in spite of all that he has done or not done, all that he has said or not said, about the pandemic and about how it's affecting the country, the economy, and our political system. So I just thought that that something had to be said to explain the phenomenon high approval rating. Some pundits and some analysts would attribute this to an uneducated, unthinking, and uncritical public. No? Others would say they were bribed, no? Because the survey was done around the time that the government was distributing all these ayudas. No? So, naloloko pala sila. No? I don't know. Still others, myself included, no? Would contend that conducting a survey at this time, especially at this time when you have an anti-terror law, no, that is poised to strike on anyone critical of government, I thought that this is probably seen as a loyalty check. That's why you got 91%. No? But after looking at the data, I've come to a kind of tentative hypothesis. Yeah? The pandemic is a shock, okay, to the country economically, but also sociopolitically. Okay? And my thesis is that these shocks, whether you talk about man-made shocks, no, like an economic crisis or an armed conflict, or natural, like a typhoon, a super typhoon like Yolanda, or a global pandemic like this one we're having with COVID-19, they actually highlight or underscore the political positions that people already have. In other words, namamagnify lang yung kanilang galit siguro or yung pagtingin nila sa gobyerno as their hope. Okay, a shock can magnify the attitudes and biases of people, making them either hate or desire government even more, no? Depending on what their positions were before the shock. No, parang, ang best analogy ko dito is that it's like a durian, no? It's either you hate it or you intense, no? Yung feeling of hate for the fruit or love for it, no? Depending on what you were predisposed to do in the start. No? So the shock predisposes people to adapt and strengthen their prior sentiments, what they already have. And to most people, actually, yeah, politics is important in their lives, okay? And in the last 10 years, we've seen more and more people using, or rather, seeing politics as being more important compared to previous decades. Okay? More important and more interesting. No? Perhaps doon nanggagaling si Professor Aguja, no? When we say that during elections, the atmosphere is like a fiesta. No? So perhaps this is where that's coming from as well. No? We don't know what their understanding of politics is. Okay, whether this is only about elections or whether it has something to do with government in between elections. No? Now, where do people get their information about politics? In the last 10 years, we've seen more and more people using social media as their daily source of daily. No, this is about the daily source of information of people. Okay, only about a third say that a third of Filipinos say that government information, the information that they get from government, is reliable. So in other words, social media becomes an even more important platform for disseminating information. But there are a couple of important points to be made here. No, I mean, I don't know if Dr. Ericta will confirm this, but the median age in the Philippines is quite young. No, my sense is that it's around the 20s, the early 20s. Okay, so you have a whole generation of the country growing up around social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., in which so social media naman kasi is different from your traditional mass media, no? Because on social media, you become the consumer and the producer of content, no? Unlike siguro sa traditional mass media, journalists produce the content, the reader, di ba, consumes it, no? Pero tayo, nagiging journalist na rin ng mga individuals. We produce content. A lot of young people are very adept at using social media nowadays. Okay? Myself excluded, no? Hindi naman ako bihasa dyan sa social media na yan, no? My Facebook friend is something like you can count on the fingers of one hand, no? Okay? Ganon kadami ang aking Facebook friends. But my sense is that most people don't have a proper appreciation of the responsibility that it entails. Diba? Ang dali-daling gamitin, and so they don't see it as themselves as being responsible for the content that they disseminate, that they click, that they like, that they produce themselves. So hence, you have a lot of fake news going around and kind of post-truth kind of view, no, spreading on social media. That anyone's view is as good as anyone else's view. Okay? So Filipinos also value electoral integrity. Many say that votes are counted fairly. Okay, at least that's their perception. But also, I mean, voters are bribed and threatened with violence during elections. So one would say, well, those are conflicting views, conflicted in views na ito. No? But that's how people perceive elections. On the one hand, people are given a choice. There's fairness, but also on the other hand, there is intimidation, there is corruption also. Okay. Now, when it comes to elections, or even outside of elections, okay, what matters most to Filipinos? What issues matter the most, no, to most Filipinos? The economy is still most important for many Filipinos in 2019, although not as much, no, as you can see, not as much compared to 2001. It used to be higher, over 60. Now it's over 40. Okay, so malaki ang binaba. No? In the meantime, fighting crime seems to be picking up as a most important issue for most Filipinos. No doubt, due to the present administration's campaign against illegal drugs, war on drugs, etc. What's also significant is that more than 2/3 of adult Filipinos in 2019 say that security is more important than freedom. Okay, that I can talk about in the next slide. So, but basically, adding the pandemic shock, now that we are into 2020, you add the shock. This will only magnify the positions of people to think that security is now even more important than before, no? than simply guaranteeing individual liberties. While you have while you have 6 out of 10 Filipinos saying that it's best to be cautious about trusting government, no? Trusting the government. More than 80%, 88% actually say that there is already respect for individual human rights these days, nowadays. No? My sense here is that Filipinos are probably now starting to question, perhaps, no, why we have too much human rights at this point. No, hindi ito complaint, no, but basically it's a sentiment that they have, that we already have a respect for. A high number of Filipinos have a high respect for human rights. In 20, okay, let's move now. Yeah, okay. Ito naman, in 2019, 2/3 of Filipinos say government is competent and efficient, no, in whatever it does. 2019 yan, okay? Before the pandemic.
Professor, liwanagin natin, that's BC, ano? That's BC, before COVID.
Before, BC pa yun. O sige, BC. Anong tawag natin after COVID? AC na.
Hindi pa, wala pa yun. Kaya let's take
Wala pa.
Ay,
oo nga, no? Yeah, you're right.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. BC, 2/3 of Filipinos say government is competent and efficient. That may change a bit, no, during the time of the pandemic. Pero like I said, it might even intensify that view, that government is actually even more efficient, more competent in handling the pandemic. No? However, around 2/3, half of Filipinos in 2019 say that people should take more responsibility for themselves. In other words, let's not rely on government anymore. Parang ganun ang tingin ko dito. No? Half, no, of Filipinos. And so, is this, a question now is this a sign of a maturing polity for the Philippines, that we're becoming more mature in terms of our attitude towards government, that we're starting to do away with the kind of mendicant culture? No? Hindi natin alam kasi kalahati pa lang, no? More or less. Nevertheless, insofar as democracy is concerned, okay, Filipinos continue to have a strong preference for democracy. Now, the question is, ano bang klaseng demokrasya ang nasa isip nila? No? Ibang question yun. No? Hindi yun masasagot ng isang survey lang. Just the same as politics. No? You look at politics as important, but what exactly are you talking about? 80% of Filipinos say that democracy is good. No? So, maganda, may preference sila. No? Around 70% say the Philippines is a democracy. Okay? And I would concur with Professor Aguha when he said that we are an elite democracy. Democracy in name, but not exactly in substance. However, ito yung sinasabi sa baba nito. No? Almost the same proportion of Filipinos say that people should obey their rulers in a democracy. No? Perhaps we can look at this as sentiment leaning towards rule of law. No? Kasi may rule of law naman sa democracy, but may rule of law din sa autocracy. No? So this could be an indication of a preference for autocratic rule, perceived as a democracy. So kailangan pa natin mas malalim na investigation dito. Finally, let me just, 70% of Filipinos say it's good to have a strong leader. I'm not just talking about not just any strong leader, but someone who, the survey item is saying a strong leader who cannot be bothered by parliament and elections. Okay, who is able to circumvent any kind of democratic institution process. There's a high preference. People are, I guess this goes back to Professor Agua's point, yung crisis of hope ng mga tao is to lean towards, the response to this crisis of hope is to lean towards a strong leader. Siguro, alam din to ni Professor Aguan, yung messianic complex, no? Yung pagkakaroon ng messianic complex ng
Teka,
mga leaders natin.
Liwanagin natin, iba yung messianic sa messiadic. Dahil ang problema mo,
Oo.
pretending to be messianic, pero messiadic. No?
Oo. Tama. Ay, iba yun. Iba yun, may sayan.
Okay. Well taken yung sinabi ninyo. Maganda yun. So, more than one of two say men make
better political leaders than women.
Uh-huh.
Half
Again.
of Filipinos. Half of Filipino. Actually, it's
One half.
56%.
Okay.
56% of voting age Filipinos say men make better political leaders than women.
Oh.
The
It
other
used to
half.
be, probably, I don't know.
Okay.
Actually, it used to be higher. It used to be 62% in 2001.
Okay.
So medyo bumaba na itong lagay na to to 56, right?
Okay.
But it's still pretty high, I think.
Yeah.
No? So I can imagine the shocks of Barawi siege of 2017, okay, and now COVID of 2020. All these sentiments might be further intensified.
Okay.
So we are probably moving away from a style of leadership, moving towards a style of leadership that's patriarchal, macho, and misogynistic. So even if some people may disagree with whatever it is the president's been saying, whatever stupid or ridiculous things he's been saying about women, about etc., about those who are opposed to government, critical of government, so on.
Mhm.
The reality is that COVID has actually strengthened the views, solidified the views even more, of people who are favoring this kind of leadership.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So, the rest actually is just a summary. Okay, summary of the points that I just related. Okay, so ang hinahanap natin basically, mga Pilipino ngayon, ay isang ama. No? So perhaps the Tatay Digong kind of narrative is doing well, for this administration and for the president.
Okay. Pero yung pagiging tatay kasi evokes responsibility, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Pero
That's
kung
right.
yung tatay maraming pamilya, that's another thing. Pwede mag-rebelde rin yung mga anak.
Yes.
Anyway, hindi yun ang paksa natin. We're not into guidance counseling today. Okay, let's be clear, no? Let's be clear about it. Okay, so this summarizes everything, Professor JB,
Yes.
Okay. So
Crime is a continuing issue and things like that. So all of these will intensify under the conditions of a shock, a pandemic right now.
Yeah. So, Professor, with all this, what you're saying is the 91% findings of pulse is not at all.
It's not odd. It's not surprising.
May pinaghuhugot.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
May pinanggagalingan sila.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
All right. Maganda to.
Siguro if I may add one more thing, siguro kasi yung honeymoon period is also very important here, Eventually people get weary, get tired, and in the case of Noynoy Aquino, he had a honeymoon period of 15 quarters. 15 quarters, Etong si Duterte is only approaching that, So he hasn't reached the 15th quarter yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so hindi natin alam what's going to happen, what's going to become the trigger of the downtrend if ever it's going to happen, Pero sa ngayon kasi napakalakas kanyang kapit sa mga tao.
Okay, very good. Yung honeymoon period is over when the couple starts magbatuhan ng plato, at tasa at tinidor. lumabas gising
Yeah.
matapos yung honeymoon. Okay. Makakasama na rin natin si Director James Jimenez in a short while. Professor Administrator Bobby Iricta, your turn, please. Share with us your views, and then we go to guests, and then we go to the COMELEC. Yes, please.
I will try, I will try to. Okay.
Historical perspective to 2016, right?
Oo.
Sige po.
Can you see the slide?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
So, ang context nito, local elections.
Okay.
Because sabi nga namin, nandyan na yung SWS, nandyan na yung Pulse Asia, doing the surveys on the national level. So we went local, and more or less, the pattern is the same for the local the places that we went to. Okay.
Okay.
70% of families discuss election, but each member decides whom to vote for. In other words, hindi imposed ng padre de pamilya kung sino yung
Iboboto.
iboboto ng bawat isa. Okay, 1 out of 3 respondents said that their household head influences lang, influences the way their family votes, but half of the respondents said their families voted for the same candidates. Let me remind you, this is local elections.
Opo.
Would you vote for the mayor's endorsee? So, or the barangay captain or the religious leader? So, hindi sila makikinig except INC members.
I was about to ask you that. When religious leaders endorse particular candidates, ano yung efficacy noong endorsement? So,
Hindi
yung
daw
pala-
nila. Well, hindi naman daw nila, it's not a determining factor.
Okay.
Tinanong din namin, ano yung mga katangian ng kandidato na makakapag-convince sa kanila
Sige.
na iboto nila. Okay, Tagalogin natin to. Madaling lapitan. So parang consistent din ito sa sinabi ni Professor Mario na may mga voters na patronage ang madaling lapitan, easy to approach. Trustworthy, ito yung may mapagkakatiwalaan. Keeps promises. May pinangako, hindi napapako.
Mhm.
Matulungin. So nandyan siya pag kailangan mo. Bukas ang kanyang bahay. And I have seen candidates who practically don't have any more privacy because from the time to the time they sleep, maraming tao sa kanila. Humihingi
Until
ng
COVID-19
KBL.
came.
Ha?
Oo. Until COVID-19 came.
Oo.
Social distancing na.
Well, merong naga-out of town.
Okay.
Tapat sila, masipag, magandang performance. Okay. Magaling magsalita.
Mhm.
So, yung mga iba, yung mga karakteristik sa pogi, matalino, galing sa magandang de buena pamilya, hindi yun factor sa kandidato.
Hindi factor yon.
Oo.
Okay. Pero mukhang
So-
kulang itong inyong category dun sa survey. Hindi natin naisama. Yung magaling sumayaw.
Naku, eto.
Pwede siguro sa good performance, no?
Good performance.
Dahil yung
Okay.
isang kandidato sumayaw lang, naging senador di ba?
Mm.
Anyway, that's something else.
Okay. So, iba pang mga nabanggit nilang katangian, gustong mabago ang sistema, palitan ng sistema, mabait, mapagkawang gawa, maganda ang platform niya, endorsed by the household head, para malaman kung ano-ano ang kakayahan, para maiba naman. Okay.
Mhm.
At ang kanilang tinitignang mga issues, parang familiar pa rin ito, no?
Aha.
Yeah.
Kakulangan ng trabaho, droga, kalusugan, kahirapan, edukasyon, infrastructure, traffic, local ito, no? Governance, peace and order, and so on.
Mhm. Okay.
So, merong details ito, karagdagang hanap buhay. So, 15% ito. Trabaho, kawalan ng trabaho, mahirap humanap ng trabaho, in effect.
Mhm.
Okay, ito yung mga verbatim na sinabi nila, no? Kaya, medyo mahaba.
You really went down, ha? Talagang sinuri ninyo.
Kasi local eh. Kailangan ng kandidato yan para malaman niya kung ano yung mga problema na dapat niyang kailangan niyang harapin. Kung sakaling manalo siya. Kalusugan.
Mhm.
Ayun. Kahit sa local level, nakikita natin tong problemang to, no?
Yeah. So, paano po yun?
Alin?
You're reaching out to voters.
More than 50% have access to internet, and unlike Professor Tigno, more than 50% also do Facebook.
Okay.
So yung iba hindi pa
Hindi pa gano'n ka-developed.
Oo.
Okay.
So yung mga sinurvey namin, meron namang mga basic amenities at home. So, okay. So yun na.
All right. Thank you, Administrator Bobby Ericta, for sharing what you got in 2016. Babalikan natin mamaya ito pag nilagom natin yung mga issue na binanggit. Sa Alemanya kaya, Gets, can you tell us briefly how it is or how it was in Germany? How different is it from the Philippines?
Yeah. Yes, of course. I have as well a little presentation.
Yes, please.
Share.
Okay.
The seat.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit surprised hearing from you that I should talk about Germany, and I was wondering who is interested in Germany. So, so I try to focus a little bit, at least where I see the differences between Germany and the Philippines. I mean, you asked me the questions: how are the elections in Germany organized? And in order to be honest, it's not such a big difference compared to the Philippines. I mean, elections are normally elections, and they take place always in the same way a little bit. Where I see a little bit different is, of course, Germany is federal. So that means we have one more kind of election. These are the federal elections. Of course, part of the European Union. We have the European Parliament election as well. And that means we have two different organizations that are in charge for the organization of the elections. One side is the National Committee for the election, and then we have a federal committee for the elections. There is a big difference to the Philippines. I mean, here the COMELEC is really prominent. I see the spokesperson of the COMELEC always in television. In Germany, and it's not only for me, so I asked a lot of friends, it's for everyone. We have no idea who the chairperson of our committee election committee is. We have never seen him. We even don't know if it's a woman or a man. Absolutely no idea, because the German Comelec is in charge for the organization of the elections. The elections, as somebody said in the beginning, are quite boring in Germany, yes. And then at the end, the German Comelec will announce the results. That's it. But yeah, we don't know who it is. It's not so prominent.
Really?
The registration process, I mean, I think I learned here in the Philippines, there is a huge discussions about the voter registrations. In Germany, we don't have it. In Germany, when you live in your LGU, you have to register in your LGU, and then automatically, when it comes to the elections, your LGU will send you by the postal service an invitation to go to the school on election day to vote there. And on an election day itself, you go there to the school, you bring your invitation, you show your national ID, and that's it. There's never a problem or discussions about the registration. Our candidates, I mean, in the Philippines, we have a lot of independent candidates, I think, and we have a lot of party switchers. In Germany, normally the candidates are party members. There are a few cases where we can have independent candidates, but it's not common at all. And what we notice as well is sometimes we have party switchers, very seldom. And once a person is switching a party, then he's considered not credible anymore. So he will not be voted again or elected again. So normally you just vote for a party and not so much for a person. Interesting as well, we don't have ballot machines. Personally, I'm quite old, 46 years old. I'm not yet convinced of these ballot machines, because always where ballot machines are in use, I hear that there are problems. And in Germany, we still count by hand, and officially, honestly, I think we seldom have problems by that. And the biggest difference for me is in Germany, somebody described it in the beginning, elections are boring. I would say, yeah, boring, okay, but especially they are non-violent, peaceful, and as well the results are accepted. And that's a big difference. I mean, we don't have the, let's say, it's seldom, it's very seldom that we have attacks on candidates. I think, as far as I know, in the last 40 years, there were 3 attacks on candidates. All 3 of them survived. It was always with a knife. So we don't shoot our candidates, we can say. And yeah, it's absolutely not common. And on the election day, you go to your school in order to vote. There's no police involved. As well, we don't have a liquor ban on the election day.
Really? You have no liquor ban?
No liquor ban, and it gets further. I mean, I'm from Munich in southern Germany, the town of the famous Oktoberfest, which is the biggest beer festival in the world. And the national elections, our national elections for the chancellor, for the German parliament, they take place usually end of September. So the national elections take place even during the Oktoberfest, during the biggest beer festival in the world, and it's absolutely no problem. So every German would be surprised if somebody would suggest to have liquor ban on the election days. So these are minor differences, I would say, that we don't see in the Philippines. Then you ask me how the citizens can get informations about the elections. I would say not so much difference. We have the classical campaigning in the Philippines, same a little bit in Germany. So TV and radio spots. By the way, they are for free in Germany. The parties don't have to pay for these TV and radio spots. The TV channels are obliged to send them. The parties don't have to pay for them. Then, of course, you have the famous public gatherings that you have here in the Philippines as well. A little bit of difference. Okay, we don't have singing and dancing candidates. We don't have we don't have bikini girls, but maybe that's given as well to the fact that it is too cold in Germany, and so everybody has got to wear something. What is a little bit different is we don't have a campaigning period. I mean, you in the Philippines, you are quite strict about this campaigning period. We don't have that. So normally there are some parties saying already, yeah, the campaigning period starts on the first day already after the election. And then it takes 4 years. Nevertheless, yeah, we see the last 3-4 months before the elections. This is really the hot campaigning period time, but there is no time limit. The big difference, and that is good in Germany, I would say, is that we have a public funding for the political parties. So that means political parties getting their funds from the German state, or parts of their funds from the German state, in relation to the results from the elections. So you can say for every vote, the party will get round about a little bit less than €1. And that's quite interesting. So you don't have a private person that has got to fund the election campaign with his own money. It is the money from the political parties, and so you don't have that that risk of a private person, of a private candidate in the elections, that he has got to win, and afterwards that he has got to regain the money for himself. How can get citizens informations about the election? And there, the political foundations we have in Germany, so-called political foundations, and the Hans Seidel Foundation is one of them. They provide the whole year over, provide civic education, and this is public funded. Political foundations means every German party that is represented in the German Bundestag has got a political foundation, and these political foundations, as I said, provide civic education to the population. The one thing is, so it's not only task of the government or the majority in the parliament to do a civic education. No, it's the task of all the political parties, meaning as well of the opposition. Of course, for us, it's coming from the Second World War, because we had very bad experiences with that civic education was only the task of the government. And what Hans Seidel Foundation now is doing is we do policy advice. We have political education in Germany, scholarship programs. Of course, we have this international cooperation, which we are using here today. The goal is to give to the population, to the citizens, informations, ideas about the political development, about the political process. Most of these trainings as well, training courses for young students. I remember myself when I was first in contact with the Hans Seidel Foundation, it was in '93, I went still to school, and I was invited for 1 week by the school to a monastery in northern Bavaria to watch German movies. And I thought, hey, that's a great idea, watching 1 week German movies, perfect. But it was quite smart, because we met there with some young students from Eastern Germany in '93. Of course, for us, people from Eastern Germany were still the enemies. Germany got reunited in '90, but never somebody of us has really seen somebody from Eastern Germany. So at that moment, the Hans Seidel Foundation thought, okay, let's bring the young students from Western Germany and Eastern Germany together, let them speak. And the best way to let them discuss and speak is to watch movies together from Eastern Germany and to Western Germany. And after this 1 week, we understood much better what happened in Eastern Germany and who these people are from Eastern Germany. So I think the system of the political foundations in Germany is quite good. But of course, and Hans Seidel Foundation as well is supporting free media, independent journalists in Germany. We have big programs in Germany, and that's what we are doing here in the Philippines as well. We are saying that free media is a key player. Journalists must be a key player, and that's the background why we are supporting PPI. So in order to end a little bit, the differences that I see, the main differences is that elections in Germany are non-violent. And I think I'm wondering what's the reason why it is in Germany non-violent and here maybe a little bit different. And I think one reason is that the political parties are funded, that they're getting money from the government. And there automatically, we don't have political dynasties. We don't know them at all. As well, we don't have term limits. So if we are happy with the mayor or even with the chancellor, and then they can stay forever until we are unhappy. There is no need for the mayor to shift that position to another member of his family because the mayor can stay in his position. Then what is relevant to all civil servants in Germany is during the time when they are working, they have a relatively average salary. I mean, the salary is good, but it's not as much as you earn in enterprises in the economy. But once your term ends, then you have got a very high pension. There's social security for your family. That means you benefit from your position, especially after the term, and that might be a motivation that you don't do. That you just perform well during your term, but you don't have to earn so much money during the term, and you don't have to take any risk because you have already the guarantee. Once your term is ended, you have a good pension, you have a good retirement money. There's no problem for your life anymore. You're peaceful. And last but not least, of course, big differences are the political foundations. But I've got to say, political foundations are, I think, only in Germany and in Hungary. Worldwide, they're not very common, and that's related to our experiences from the Second World War and our new constitution from '49. So thank you very much. That was my very quick overview about the German election system. I hope it was not too boring. Thank you.
All right. It's definitely not boring because what you said in Germany, you don't have political dynasties. Let me ask you, Getz, how old are people willing to go to Germany as migrants? What's the age limit? Because with what you said, most Filipinos may opt to go to Germany as immigrants. Where there are no political dynasties, no?
Yeah.
And in fact, there is no age limit for immigration. And at the moment, the German government is desperately looking for Filipino nurses to help our health system.
Okay.
There are even programs running here, but there's no age limit.
Very briefly, Getz, how different is the Philippines from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where you were once assigned?
Yeah, completely different. I would say it's impossible to compare the Philippines to Africa. Their elections are more violent. A funny difference is really in Congo, you don't shoot people as well. You attack people with the machete and you burn them alive. But you don't shoot them. Congo, of course, is much more violent. There is no trust at all in elections. There are not so much political dynasties, but nobody believes in elections. So it's a completely different game, and it's hard for me to compare it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for the candid answer. I hope Director James Arthur Jimenez is still with us. Director Jimenez, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, please. Director Jimenez. Nawala yata yung connection ni Director. Susubukan natin ulit. Director Jimenez, I hope you're still with us.
Nawala siya.
Okay. Nawala siya. I-message ko siya. I hope he can still join us. Has it ever occurred to our panelists that there are politicians who would rather keep their voters poor? I asked Professor Tigno about this. Because is it just dental that insurgency, there is poverty, naroon din yung political dynasties. Professor Mario, your thoughts please.
Yeah. Well, hindi ko na kung sinasadya, no, na to really keep them poor. But what is interesting, our dynasties would like to maintain power. And one way of maintaining power is really to serve as a patron saint for many of the people. I think very clearly with the case in Germany, you find how weak are our institutions. You know, that you have to go to politicians to get services, for example, or to do election work. I know like in our case, to win an election, you should have bags of money so that you will be able, for example, to access the TV, the radio, for example. No, these are services that should have been provided to the public. Interestingly, Melo, and I think Professor Tigno and Dr. Erecta will agree with me, in the Philippines, the things that we would like to happen in our political landscape is also the same thing that many of our politicians don't like to happen. For example, we cannot pass the anti-dynasty law up to today. No? We cannot have the law. No, it has been there. It's been lagging in Congress on turncotism, for example. It seems to be a badge. No? The ability of resilience of politicians to move from one political party to the other. And as usual, every time you have a new president, everybody aligns to the party of the new president. We could not pass a law on that. Political financing, for example, is a law also that we could not pass in the Philippines. That, you know, we allocate for political parties, for example, for every number of votes they get. I think this is inspired also by our German friends, no, to strengthen our institutions. So those critical legislation for electoral reforms in the Philippines are just lagging there, because the very people that will be affected by it are the very people that wields power up to today in the Philippines. And if you talk of poverty, if I may, I actually made just one slide, if you will allow me, Lono. I think Professor Tigno is also very familiar on the discourse on the middle class, where we are in the middle class, because it says you have a strong democracy or institutions of democracy when you have middle classes. But in the Philippines, the middle class is a very small, no? And the poor and etc. had been lagging in poverty for the longest time, are the very people who are also victimized regularly by patronage politics. These are people that are in needs of jobs and security. That's why if you answer the question, jobs and security remains number one, no? Because the issue of corruption, transportation, etc. are basically middle class issues. No, political reforms are middle class issues based on studies in different countries. No, kasi yun yung interest nila eh. Siyempre, malaking pamilya, pag mahirap, malalaki yung pamilya na mahihirap sa Pilipinas, no? But ito, because this is what they have in the middle class, these are interests that they like to protect. No, television issues, for example, ABS-CBN issues and media issues is basically a middle class issue in the Philippines. That's why it's not so noisy when you have these issues. No?
Okay.
Traffic, for example. No? The traffic issue, para sa mahihirap, hindi namin problema masyado yung traffic. No? Wala nga kaming sasakyan, problemahin pa namin yung traffic. So that makes a lot, and that's why we in the Philippines, we hope that we could advance to become a middle-class society. Nandiyan yan sa Ambition 2040 natin. No? And many countries that were able to develop a stronger electoral system and a better democratic system are actually countries also which has increasing also on the economic sphere.
Okay.
Dahil magka-relate sila. So yun yung big challenge sa atin sa election natin. In fact ngayon, nakikita siya na yung election ay once every 3 years na opportunity, no, sa mga kababayan natin na makakuha ng patronage, makapalakas sa politiko, na sana ma-hire man lang na job order in the local government, for example. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're joined by Director James Jimenez. Director, good morning and welcome. Welcome aboard.
Good morning, sir. I'm sorry I'm a little late. There was a NBank meeting sort of overlapping. But I'm
Okay.
here now, so good morning.
Can you please tell us the response to the COMELEC's call for people to register?
Right. Well,
How is it?
yeah.
Full-
Well, in the early days of voter registration, we started on September 1 earlier this year. And in the early days of the registration, medyo mababa ang response, no? People were not coming out to register for the most part because number one, they were fearful, obviously, of the virus. And second, there's this lingering notion that the mobility restrictions set by the IATF would prevent them from voter registration. One of the biggest target demographics of this round of voter registration is the youth, which means these are people 20 years old and below, and that is precisely the age group that has this mobility restriction imposed by the IATF. That and those who are 60 and above, the senior citizens. Now, interesting thing about this pandemic is that because of the pandemic, people have really developed a sort of reliance on government aid. The problem is that government aid is apparently being made contingent on a person's status as a registered voter. So this new requirement that you'd have to be a registered voter in order to qualify for aid has increased the pressure on these two age groups. The very young, because they need the subsidies that they can get from government when they're going to public institutions of learning, and the very old, because they need the money because they would not get support otherwise. So in the early days of voter registration, these were the two demographics that were very low in terms of response. And as a result, medyo mababa yung levels of compliance ng ating voter registration. However, just last month, the president announced, IATF announced that the mobility restrictions would be lifted for both the very young and the very old. And so we've seen slowly an increase in the number of registrants. Still, in the last 10 to 12 weeks of registration, we have barely reached 1 million applications for registration. So that's still very low, considering that we have a target of about 4 to 5 million registrants this cycle. So we hope that by next year, when we start allowing satellite registration and then things might have settled a little bit more, then we hope that we will see an increase in the number of registrants as well.
I'm also interested in finding out, aside from the reasons you mentioned, could it be possible that the young people do not trust the system, that they don't want to register?
Well, that's always been sort of one of those things that people talk about, and certainly for some of the youth, that is an issue. But I think a better barometer would be their engagement in the political discussion, and you can see this through their participation in social media, through the comments that they send to our websites. There is great interest. I have to admit, though, that there is also a fair amount of skepticism about the system. Hindi nakakatulong that very early on in the process, ang unang lumabas sa mga pananalita ng ibang mga politiko is, can we cancel the elections? So all of these factors combine, no? Apart from the native distrust of politics and election systems, nandyan pa yung nakikita nilang people are maneuvering to postpone the elections. So ang net result is a sort of disenchantment with the system. So yes, that is definitely something that we are having to address.
Director James, would you also consider using technology to your advantage, that our young and old voters can use the computer to get themselves registered, as they do in Germany, as what our good friend Getz said a while ago?
Oh, we would love nothing better than to be able to leverage modern technology for registration. But there are two big hurdles, Sir Melo. The first is Republic Act 8189, which very specifically says that a person has to be personally appearing before the election officer in order to register. And second, the mandatory biometrics law, which requires people to submit their biometrics, the fingerprint, the facial image, and the recording of the signature in order to be registered. As of now, what we can do is we can probably have a workaround to sort of give substantial compliance with the personal appearance requirement, but there is no such thing as substantial compliance right now when it comes to biometrics. There's no technology, to our knowledge, nor has any been presented to us, that will allow us to gather reliably the biometrics of a person remotely. So, for instance, ikaw, Sir Melo, if you want to register, I have no way of getting your biometrics over the air. So you still have to come to the COMELEC office. So, having said all of that, I know it's a long answer, pasensya na. But having said all of that, what we are doing is we're trying to chop up the entire process into what we can go online with and what we cannot go online with. So the process is long, right? So you have your voter filling up the application form, submitting the application form, the interview, and so on. And then the next block, you have the biometrics. We're trying to do the first block so that you can submit it online. We are about to launch what we call iRehistro. And iRehistro will allow us to submit application forms online. But the second block, biometrics, remains a hurdle. So what's the use of rolling out what is essentially an incomplete solution? Well, the thing is that first block that I was talking about takes up about 90% of the time that you spend in the COMELEC office to register. If you're in the COMELEC office to register for, let's say, around 30 minutes, then more than half of that time, like I said, about 90% of that time is spent queuing up, filling up a form, waiting for your turn. So that takes a long time. But if you cut that down, then you're left with the last remaining 10%, which is maybe around 5 to 10 minutes, where all you need to do really is to show up, identify yourself, and present your biometrics. So it's an incomplete solution, yes, but it does achieve part of the goal, which is to make it easier for people to register.
Really, thank you for the reassurance that something is being done. But would you refresh my memory? In 2016 and 2019 elections, of the X number of voters, how many actually voted?
In the previous elections, we had a voter turnout of about 78%. So we actually have a very high turnout compared to other nations. I think the most common benchmark for many people is the American elections, and not counting the not counting the outlier 2020 elections where they had more than 140 million voters voting. In general, their voter turnout is usually below 60%, but we have consistently had voter turnouts in the high 75, 78 range.
Great. How sure are we that only legitimate voters actually voted and there were no representatives voting for some other people?
Well, one of the things that one of the benefits we get from mandatory use of biometrics is that at the polling station there are biometrics available for us to compare with the person in front of the election officer, or I'm sorry, with the election inspector. So we're able to see, we're able to verify the identity of the voter right then and there. In fact, that's one of the reasons why some people have been turned away from voting, because in some cases they have presented themselves as someone else, and those were discovered very quickly because either the face, the image didn't match, or the signatures didn't match, or in some cases where we used a voter verification system, the fingerprints didn't match.
Okay. Pero paano yun kung nagpaganda kay Belo? Maiiba yung mukha.
As long as hindi nagbago ang identity, sir. Kung mas pogi siya,
Okay.
pwede.
Baka mamaya, pag bigla nagpa-makeover yan, di na makilala ng computer, no? Anyway,
Hindi naman.
that's just on the lighter side of it. Pero may binanggit si Professor Tigno kanina. Economy is an issue. With so many poor people, many out of jobs, don't you think this will be an issue come 2022?
Well, I think it should be an issue. I think it should be an issue. As far as the impact of economy on voting, what we've seen is that one of the largest voting blocks is actually people from lower economic brackets. Sila yung talagang na-mobilize. I mean, there are a lot of cynical arguments about why that is, and maybe I'm not going to go into that right now, but certainly, historically, nakikita natin that many of the actual turnout actually came from the lower income brackets. Namomobilize po yung mga kababayan nating mahihirap. And that's a historical trend that we see. Now, when I say that economics should be an issue, what I mean is that people should have should be thinking of the economy when they vote, is what I'm saying. No? One of the things that the pandemic has done for us is that it crystallized the relationship between their right to vote and their voting day choices to the kind of governance that they receive. And governance ultimately boils down to a matter of economics. Yung mga kababayan natin na hindi nakakatanggap ng ayuda, they know why. Because they voted for people na hindi nagagampanan yung kanilang mga papel as elected officials. So we hope that the issue of economics really takes front and center dito sa halalan na to. Not just in terms of sinong bumoboto, but in terms of paano sila bumoboto.
Good. Thank you, Director. Yes, Professor Tigno, please.
Yeah, thank you, James, for those points. No? But when it comes to, economic issues and the current pandemic, I think it's important to see it in a nuanced light. Different local governments, for example, might be more effective, in terms of addressing the pandemic, providing assistance to their residents and so on, than others. No? But I wonder about LGUs that are not performing as well as others. Okay, whether there is a consequence for them eventually, given the trend now of associating ayudas with, registering to vote, becoming a registered voter. But I have another question kasi yung point ni James kanina about biometric data collection.
Yes,
because other government agencies collect the same biometric data.
That's right.
Hindi lang COMELEC. No? So bakit hindi natin pwedeng ma-integrate ito so that I just have to go to LTO, for example, and I'm registered as a voter already. No? I don't have to go to COMELEC or LTO to DFA or whatever.
That's right. I understand. May I answer, Sir Melo?
Yes, please.
Okay. As far as the second question goes, the reason for that is because COMELEC jealously guards its database. We cannot. Well, up to this point, we have stayed out of consortiums meant to more efficiently use the biometrics database of other government agencies, such as the UMID, for instance, sir. I know you're aware of that, the Universal ID. We're not part of that consortium simply because we do not want our database to be available to anyone else. Because apparently, when you buy into that system, then you can use their database, but they can use your own database as well. And one of the guarantees that we give to voters is that the information they provide us will only be used for elections. So that's the one thing. Now, having said that, we are working on a partnership with the DFA. The Department of Foreign Affairs, they issue passports and they have biometric collection as well. So one of the things we're working on now is to find a way to securely share biometric information between DFA and the COMELEC. And that starts with a very small segment of the population. Only the population essentially na may passport. And we think it's an intermediate step towards later on, maybe, as you said, in the States they do this, no? You go to the DMV and you're registered to vote. Hopefully we get to that point someday. But right now, with the state of affairs, medyo hindi pa po yan nangyayari. As to your first point, yung sa relationship, well, definitely, sana makita natin na mayroong connection, no? In terms of sa voters. And yan ang ginagamit namin ngayon sa voter education, yan ang ginagamit naming benchmark. We want to see if we're making an impact kasi hopefully, people are more enlightened now about the power of their vote. If they vote for the same people, then maybe we failed in our job, right? Maybe we didn't connect those two concepts well enough.
Okay, that's a very good point. Director James, let me cite to you a particular place in Camarines Sur. When you have a congressman whose family name is Villafuerte, and the son is the governor, and another Villafuerte holds another position, and still another Villafuerte is being soft, how do I term that? Soft-held or something into the general consciousness. How do you deal with that when you only have this family to choose from?
well, that's the dilemma of voters and of lawmakers who are trying to get an anti-dynasty law in place. They tried to solve that with the SK. That was a very difficult implementation, and you're talking about only kids, really. I mean, kid politicians, right? You're not talking yet about the big entrenched interests. So, yun po ang problema eh. And there are arguments on both sides that make a whole lot of sense. No, I admit personally, my sensibilities run counter to dynastism. I feel that dynastism prevents the emergence of new leaders. And when we lecture, the imagery I use is of a cork. The dynasty is like a cork on the potential of a certain area, so that instead of developing the talent in that area, you run up against the cork, right? And the cork keeps you bottled in, so no one grows. And that's the reason for that is not just because of elected officials, Sir Melo, but also because when you're an elected official in a province, you tend also to have an impact on the non-elected officials. So you tend to have a say in who you appoint as DepEd supervisor. You tend to have an influence in who gets to be this chief or that chief. And ang net result niyan is that no one gets to rise up without the patronage of the big politicians. So dynastism is not just a politics problem per se, not an electoral politics problem. It's a problem of leadership, basically throughout the constituency.
But one thing I can tell you about politicians, let's say in Camarines Sur, so they don't have quarrels, no? What they do is they just divide the province into districts. So you will be the king, let's say in Partido, you have the Fuentebellas, you have the Andayas, you have the Alpelors, and now you have somebody else. So there's no quarrel because they divide the they divide the province.
Well, Sir Melo, there's no quarrel, absolutely, but there's also no democracy. One of the things that COMELEC has been very much against, especially in recent years, is the so-called unity candidates. No, unity candidates are a way of bypassing really the competitive nature of elections. Usap-usap na lang tayo, let's cut this up. Sa'yo Tondo, akin ang Blumentritt. Parang ganyan. And that's really a callback to feudal times, no? Again, we're going into entrenched problems.
Director James, I hope you're in the plantilla position, right?
I am.
Thank you. I'm worried. You're my friend, and getting worried because what you say, it may endanger your position.
No, sir. I've been talking like this since 2001 and they know me for who I am. Kaya nga nandito pa rin ako. Kaya hindi ako umuusad. Joke.
Darating yan. Si Professor Aguha coming from MSU in General Santos. How do you look at all these issues? You also have that issue in your area. without necessarily endangering your position, objectively and academically looking at it, how do you feel?
Well, I think for us in the academe, we are much more privileged, on presenting our opinion on a public fora because we are in the academe. No? And for as long as we get our tenure, we do good teaching our students, then by all means, we continue to be protected by law. But I think I agree with Attorney Jimenez. For the regular employees in the bureaucracy, that would be really a very difficult one. Dahil the options are very limited. For us, Professor Tigno and myself, if we get kicked out from our university, we can find a job somewhere else. No, that will not be a very, very difficult mobility for us. But for those in the locals, it's where really the strong pressures are. No, and I think the reforms really need to be institutionalized in different front. I could agree with Director Jimenez na mahalaga talaga, well, COMELEC can only do as much, what the law provides to them. But halimbawa, the anti-dynasty law, kahit ano pang sabihin ni Atty. Jimenez dyan, mukhang mahirap talaga siyang mabago. No? Kami nga, gagaling on the party list nga lang eh. Hindi mo na mabago-bago yung batas ng party list ngayon. No? Kasi yung mga nakaupo sa party list ay hindi na siya yung marginalized. So there's just really no way to change and reform the law to make it responsive to the very intent of the law. No? But I think there are a lot of fronts also COMELEC can really help. No? One pointed out, how do we really improve our registration system? Because our registration system, tama si Kwan, hindi pa dumadami ho ngayon yung nagre-rehistro kasi hindi pa nagsisimula yung hakutan para magparehistro. Hakutan yan. When you go to the province, hakutan yan. No? You really kasi pag galing ng rural area, remember you have only one COMELEC office. No? It's probably at the center of the town.
Yes.
If you have people out there, what is their incentive on going to COMELEC just to register because to be called a good citizen? No? So that's really difficult. That is to be away of their jobs, of their work, whatever little income they may have. Pero pag hinakot sila, alam naman nila na hahakutin sila. Dahil ito nga ay naging bahagi ng patronage culture, so meron pang pabaon yan, meron pang pamerienda yan, libre pa ang sasakyan. No? Then it's where you have a surge. But the problem in there, it starts to plant that sense of loyalty to these people already. No? It's a mayor so-and-so or it's a governor so-and-so na nagparehistro sa amin. So they take care of us. Then it's where the patronage thinking starts. No, hindi pa gumagasto yan ng, no, we are not yet spending money for the campaign, for example, and other things. Then, while I'll agree that the issue of economy is always an electoral issue or an issue in an election, except for many of our people, the thinking of economics is always on a short term. Anong makukuha ko agad? No? Mahahire ba ako sa City Hall? Kung ward leader ako, mahahire ba ako na job order? No? Kaya if you look at local government, mas maraming ngayong local government, they have bigger number of job orders than regular employees. No? So, yes.
Siguro, Professor, for the succeeding editions ng ating discussions, I would request you to do a study on the number of job orders. Because this goes to show how government takes care of its people.
Yeah.
I was in a facility some time ago, and I learned may isang engineer who's been at his work for about 20 years, job order lang siya. Yung kanyang assistant, 18 years, job order lang siya. Okay? So this goes to show that an incumbent, whether president, governor, or mayor, or congressman, will have a role to play in the appointment of people. Way back in 1991, may his soul rest in peace, I asked then Speaker Monching Mitra, sabi ko, Speaker, what if you don't get endorsed by Tita Cory? What will happen? Sabi niya, I will have to have 1 billion pesos more for my campaign. Sabi ko, bakit? Yung cycle ng mga casual, number one. So why would I vote for someone na hindi na-endorse? Eh di dito na ako sa in-endorse. Number two, makakasakay ka ng libre. Dahil in the guise of official business, pwedeng pumunta yung mga tao makapaghakot ng manonood sa rally. You know, things like this happen. So it's about 1 billion. No? I don't know. Administrator Bobby Ricta, looking at the
That was
figure,
in 1991.
Ngayon, mahal na. Maliit na yung
Wala
1
pa
billion
yun.
ngayon.
1 billion. Hindi, yung additional budget na kailangan.
Ah.
Your views about
It's really
facts
expensive.
and figures. Ano po ang inyong masasabi sa facts and figures natin ngayon? Will the youth be interested to register?
I think the youth are interested to register because of the turn of events in the recent past, especially with the problems of COVID and ayuda and the performance of officials. I think what turns them off is the process of registering. Diba? But I'm happy that our Comelec spokesperson is doing something about it.
Yes.
Kasi nga itong millennials na to, maiksi ang ano nila eh. Maiksi ang pasensya.
That's true.
Okay.
Restless.
But may I also comment on the job orders?
Yes, please.
Because having come from a government agency, it's true that many persons remain casuals for a very long time. And at some point, we tried to help them to gain regular positions. The main problem they have is that they don't have civil service eligibilities. And
Okay.
so we tried to help them pass the exams by having review classes, tutoring them, in effect, preparing them for the exam. Pero talagang merong mga empleyado o may mga workers na malas sa exam. So it's not exactly only the fault of the employer or the fault of the agency. Meron ding participation ng employee.
Yeah.
Sir Milo.
Yes,
Yeah.
Professor
Yes.
Mario.
Yes, quickly lang. I think in the national government agencies, the issue of job order remains manageable. No, I think the problem is with the local government units. If you remember, for example, COA flagged down Davao City, that I think they have equal number of job orders as well as regular employees in there. Because it's where really the promises in the election that were done to offer you job, and it's where the local bureaucracy is politicized. Because the rumor every election, if you will not support the mayor, then you will be out of your work. No?
Yeah.
Then that divides the employees from within because they like to secure as well that kind of job, no, little as it may, the income, but nevertheless, it's a continuing source of funds for people. So that really creates a lot of problem in there, no. There are efforts to cut down on that now, but I think it will take some time, no, because many local politicians would really, especially mayors and governors, would really oppose the effort because it becomes a goodies after election that you provide to campaigners, supporters, and it's where you create your title, that you create a local economy.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Let me ask you, in your experience in Germany, how much does a lawmaker or a local government official get for serving the people?
It's a little bit different, but a lawmaker in the German parliament gets around 9,000 euros per month. So it's quite a good salary, but of course he's got to pay taxes. That's a little bit more than an average German worker gets. But, and this is the big, this is the big part. So 9,000 euros a month is already quite good, of course.
A billion.
But
Pesos.
it is not best. In the economy, when you're a lawyer, you can earn much more. But the big but is you get a pension when you have served 2 terms in the German parliament. And this pension is really high. It's round about the same, 9,000 euros a month. And even when you die, your family will get that pension as well. So you're well off. You don't have to worry about the future anymore. And that's a main benefit. the main advantage.
Do you have death penalty in Germany?
Death penalty, no.
Yes. You don't have death penalty.
No death
Okay.
penalty. No.
Okay. The reason I ask is it may be related to something about corrupt practices. You know, they feather their nests while they're still there, so that they cannot worry when they get out of their job. They have a lot to pay the lawyers to defend them in court. No, it's entirely different.
I
Okay.
think you're
Yes,
talking about a different place.
I think
yeah. Professor JB, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, Melo, well, what we're faced here is a kind of catch-22 situation. We can't reform because the reformers themselves don't see the value in reforming, in changing the system, because they're basically benefiting from it, from the poverty, from the misery, from the need, no, of the people. So I wonder, because I mean, we're not the only country that had that or that is in that situation or that used to be in that situation. America, for example, invented the idea of modern patronage, modern bossism. Okay, Germany, I'm sure, would have had some measure, some degree of patronage at some point, in its history. So how are these countries able to overcome this kind of catch-22 situation?
Okay. It's a very difficult condition we're in. You know, I covered the House of Representatives in 1995, and there was a congressman, may his soul rest in peace, Congressman Tito Espinosa, who was head of the Committee on Electoral Reforms. And I asked him, what do you have to say about the political dynasty provision in the Constitution? And he said, you may not believe it, I come from a political dynasty myself. But I am proposing changes to make everything fit. But it seems, well, he was killed, sad to say, and I don't know whether it was ever solved. Why is it that people get killed in the process? Yes, James, Director James? Your
Yeah,
thoughts?
not about the killing yet, but I wanted to address what Professor Tigno was asking. How do
Yes,
these other jurisdictions get past that boss system? I know this will sound naive and sort of wild, wide-eyed idealism, but I think it's because their election systems are accessible to more people than those election systems are here. In other countries, a waitress in a bar in New York can run and become a congresswoman. Subukan mo yan sa Pilipinas. See how far you can get with that sort of background. No matter how intelligent you are, if you're not connected to pedigree, if you're not connected to money, if you're not connected to political interest, you have a steep uphill climb. I'm not saying it's impossible. It has happened. But the very difficulty of managing that, I think, lends strength to the entrenched interests that are already there. So if we cannot make the electoral system more accessible, then we're going to have to slog through this problem for a longer time than absolutely necessary. So it could be a chicken and egg situation. So anong mauna? Gandahan ba yung batas para dumali ang elections, or kailangan lang may mangyari sa elections para magbago yung batas? I really don't have the answer to that. But to my mind, it's clear that one of the ways to fix the problem is to ensure that more people are able to vote or run for office. Kasi doon naman talaga yun eh. The people who are entrenched now, they're entrenched because people voted them into office. And they got voted into the office because they had access. So if you give access to everyone, like for instance, if Melo wants to run for senator, he should be able to, and not have to worry about how much it's going to cost him, how he's going to make a living if he loses, that sort of thing. Kaya din from that makikita mo rin kung bakit sobrang hirap bumitaw yung mga natatalo eh. Because all in na sila doon eh, di ba? Nakompromiso na sila to put it very bluntly. Kaya ang hirap bitawan din. So I think that might be one of the root causes that we need to address. As far as the killing is concerned, well, I don't know.
Yeah. Let me know your views about premature campaigning. The campaign season is still 90 days, and you get to see uh, photoshopped pictures almost everywhere, either in streamers, pati nga yung bigas sa Camarines Sur, may mukha na ng Triolos Guapos, you know? How do we deal with that?
Let me tell you about premature campaigning, Sir Melo. Look, a candidate is supposed to spend only, what, 3 pesos per voter if they're not running for president. More if you're running for president. And that limitation kicks in only at the start of the campaign period. It starts at the start of the campaign period, which is essentially about 3 months before elections. All right. But you know what? Election campaigns start way before that. They start campaigning before they even file certificates of candidacy.
Precisely.
But those are not included. Those expenses are not included in the official tally of costs. So we have absolutely zero control of how much money is being spent, because they will spend only so much during the approved period, but they will spend billions more during the period when it is not regulated. So that makes it practically impossible to prevent early campaigning, which, again, and I'm speaking out of turn here, which is probably a signal for the rest of us to start thinking beyond the box, outside of the box, and say, maybe there are better ways of doing this, because you really cannot prevent people from speaking out. Once they run for office, they do have to speak out about their campaigns. They do have to try to get as many votes as they can. So there has to be a more efficient and more effective way of limiting their ability to do that. And right now, our existing system, just isn't up to the task.
We have a good idea here from Manny Haudian. Sabi ni Manny, COMELEC should not accept casuals hired and paid for by local officials na nagtatrabaho sa local COMELEC.
That's true.
How true is this?
It's true. It is a big problem, and we are addressing it currently. But like Professor Mario pointed out, in a huge province or a huge town, isa lang ang COMELEC doon. Tapos yung COMELEC doon, nag-iisang tao lang or dalawa. And wala kaming budget to get more people. So, LGUs, under the law, are supposed to give support to the election officer, to the election office. Doon nanggagaling po yung dahilan kung bakit merong mga LGU casuals sa tinatawag. Right now, for the past 3 or 4 budget cycles, we've been ramping up our budget requests so that we can wean ourselves off of dependence on LGU casuals. And right now, I think we're about 80% of the way. Parang 80% ng LGU casuals that we used to hire before ay hindi na po hinahire ngayon or hindi na tinatanggap.
Yeah. Maganda kasi yung sinasabing partnership. Pero kung minsan yung partnership nagiging collaboration. At yung mga datos na hindi dapat lumabas na ilalabas.
Hindi lang po 'yon. It's also a two-edged sword, kasi kung kakampi mo yung LGU, di masaya ka, happy days. Kung hindi mo kakampi yung LGU, you get stuck in an office under the stairs. And that has happened to the COMELEC many times in many places, no? They go from an adequate office to a small cupboard, literally cupboard under the stairs of the city hall. So again, this sort of dependence on LGUs is really toxic. I mean, there are benefits, but I think the ill effects outweigh the benefits. Kaya nga po ngayon, isa sa mga continuing projects namin is to enhance the physical plant, no? Yung physical infrastructure ng COMELEC offices. Kahit maliit lang yan, basta amin, we can protect our independence better that way.
But you have to work with LGUs for them to donate the lot for you. Diba?
Yun po ang isa sa pinakamalaking hurdle. But in some cases, we're scrounging up enough money to actually buy property or to procure the use of property. No, there are a lot of kind-hearted donors. I mean, meron naman, but we're also very careful because we don't want the kind-hearted donations to turn out to have strings pala later on. So konting
Yeah.
ingat din tayo.
Sabi ni Elmer James Bandol from Legazpi City, sabi niya, kung ang Congress daw hindi magtutulak ng anti-dynasty measures, posible ba na yung regionalized legislation could answer the same emerging problem every election? I don't know in which capacity will they ever do it. Director?
I don't know that they would because I guess the interests of the national level politicians are roughly the same as the interests of the regional level politicians. So kung ano yung nagmo-motivate sa taas, ganun din ang nagmo-motivate sa baba. So wala pa ring parang wala pa ring impetus to actually force anti-dynasty legislation. Also, aanhin mo naman yung anti-dynasty legislation kung isang region lang ang apektado. Ganun pa rin yung problema sa iba. And until the problem is solved for everyone, the problem is still there for everyone. So parang it might be a good place to start, but I don't see it as a long-term solution.
Binanggit ni Getz kanina sa Germany that the government spends for the political campaigns. Do you see that happening in the Philippines?
That is one of the proposals that we're sort of shepherding. Campaign finance reform. The reason for that is that if you have campaign finance reform, then individual candidates will have less reason to scrounge up money, possibly cutting down on corrupt practices. It makes them less beholden to vested interests. Again, possibly cutting down on corrupt practices. But at the same time, it ensures a level playing field for everyone. Okay. Not a level playing field in the sense that it's equal all the time. No, I mean, there are systems where you get as much money as your, say, political showing dictates. No, so the more popular you are, the more funds you have access to. Parang ganyan. So it's an equitable sharing of funds. But that way, you do have a sort of leveled playing field. Hindi katulad ngayon, kung sino may access sa pera, medyo may luck na rin sa elections, no? Unless something massive happens in your favor and you don't have money, like I don't know, someone famous in your family dies and you get the sympathy vote, but those are outliers kasi. So in order to make it more systematic and more shall we say reliable, campaign finance reform is a major step forward. Unfortunately, ang psyche ng Pilipino naman is that bakit natin sila bibigyan ng pera, pondo, buwis natin yan, sila yung makikinabang. So it's like a vicious cycle, di ba, Prof? Para bang so ayaw ng tao kasi sabi na nakawin. So it's a hard sell. It's a hard sell. But it's not something that we're giving up on.
Yeah. We have a question from a friend from Cagayan de Oro. Ano raw strategy ng COMELEC to stop vote buying? Committed na harap-harapan. I all the while thought this is being done in secret. Pero harapan na raw yung pamimili ng boto.
Medyo garapalan na ngayon, sir. And the vote buying actually starts long before the election day. No? And the vote buying now is no longer just I'll give you money, you vote for my manok. It's now, I'll give you money, don't vote at all. So may mga variations na ng vote buying. We have right now a task force on vote buying. And what we do is we coordinate with local law enforcement to provide protection to witnesses and to give assistance for litigation. Ang problema kasi sa vote buying is that it's very hard to abate it. By abate, I mean to stop it while it's happening. Right now, the tools that we have actually will only work after the event has happened. pag may krimen na naganap and may makakasuhan ka na. But to prevent it, as in before it happens, at this point, medyo malabo pa yun.
James, hindi kaya pwedeng gawin ng curfew yung 24 hours before the elections para walang lalabas ng bahay. Kung sa before gumagapang yung mga Santa Claus.
Ang problema, sir, hindi naman vampira ang mga buyer. So, kahit araw gumagalaw yung mga yan.
Okay.
I don't want to give anyone
online.
Yun na nga, tama si Ma'am Mel. I don't want to give anyone ideas, pero may GCash na po. So,
GCash na eh.
Yeah. Milo, dagdag ko lang.
Yes,
Dati
Professor.
kasi when we're in the early days of the campaign, no, na malakas yung vote buying pa. Talagang yung ora de peligro mo, binabantayan namin yung mga communities kasi nakikita mo yung mga runners nagdi-deliver ng pera. Ora de peligro 'yan. Pero ngayon wala na ora de peligro. Does not work that way because earlier that has been arranged. Second, we don't have a vote buying the way it used to be in the past because when you have this electronic system, technically mahirap siya, no? Pero what is surprising is you have a lot of poll watchers in the precinct because that's how you buy them. So technically 3 days, 1 week before election, meron ng designated na mga poll watchers. Magugulat ka, may 20 na poll watcher yung isang kandidato sa isang presinto. Lahat bayad yon. No, they might not all vote for the candidate, but the chances that they will vote is higher than if they are not part of it. So magugulat ka nung binabantayan, no? Pero it's really the payment in there that makes the election very expensive.
Yeah, Professor. Pero what is surprising, meron ka ng 20 watcher, pagdating ng result, 0 ka pa.
Kasi marami yung kabila.
Oo. yung mga gumagastuho ng ganon, talagang yung monitoring and data nila is really very efficient on the ground, no? These are ward leaders by street, no? Talagang well monitored yan. I think they can monitor the voters more than the COMELEC.
yes.
More than the COMELEC. Talagang ito yung matingkad. Kaya nga, pag hindi na kaya nung economic na yan, it's where violence get into the picture. Because at the end of the day, the economics, the money you spend for election has limits. Pag hindi na kaya, dahil masyado nang matindi yung competition, no? Na everybody's buying everybody. No? Parang, may equilibrium sila. Then it's where violence gets into the picture because you start initiating entrepreneurs of violence to do liquidation and intimidation. Because at the end of the day, it's cheaper than spending money and putting everybody in your payroll actually during elections.
Professor, bago ko ibigay kay Director James Jimenez, may napalita ka na rin mga barangay officials na napatay after elections dahil may term sa Bicol yun. Sinulmok yung pondo, binulsa yung pondo. Yung ganun, ano?
Yeah. Ngayon po, hindi na rin dinadaan sa third party yung pagbababa ng pera. Dati kasi, by layer, no? Sa mayor, bababa mo, yung mayor, bababa niya sa barangay captain, yung barangay captain, bababa niya doon sa mga purok leaders. At least in our area, hindi na ho ganun. Merong isang direct na finance officer that goes down directly doon sa mga street leaders mo para masigurado na natatanggap yung pera talaga. Kasi maraming ungguyan na nangyari na binubulsa. So ito yung binabalikan after election. Nangyayari po. Pero ngayon, at least in our area, hindi na ganon. Meron kang umiikot na ito yung bagman basically, diretso yung pera pababa.
Okay. Yeah. Director.
Yes, tama po yung sinasabi
of creativity, no?
Never. Totoo po yun. Yung mga lideres, they actually have a very good read on the voters kasi kilala nila yung mga blocks nila . So they know for instance each household has 10 voters. They know when that household goes to vote. So pag nagbibilangan natitrack nila yan . So kaya maraming takot. Now the thing with vote buying is that what we've seen is that sa probinsya yung native Filipino honesty means na pag binayaran ka, boboto ka doon sa nagbayad sa'yo. Pero in places like the NCR, medyo mas scared yung mga politiko kasi sa NCR, yung mga binabayaran, hindi lahat nagde-deliver. So that's an added dynamic there, no? But bottom line, right now, vote buying is on the rise again because a lot of politicians, because they know that it's very difficult to mount a protest otherwise, they try to influence the outcome from the input side. No, if you look at it that way po kasi, dati ang dayaan doon sa output side, no? Kaya mo na yung mga input, yung mga voters kasi kung
Kailangan.
naman yan, ayusin mo yung resulta. Kasi yung resulta, yung 1 vote nagiging 100 nang walang kahirap-hirap. Pero ngayon, dahil medyo mahirap na yung output side, nahirapan sila mag-manipulate ng election results and nahirapan sila mag-challenge ng election results, doon nila tinutuon ang interest nila doon sa botante. Kasi yung botante ngayon ang weak link. Yung botante pwedeng mabayaran para bumoto sa'yo, pwedeng mabayaran para hindi bumoto sa kalaban mo, at maaring bayaran para hindi bumoto at all.
Okay. May tanong yung kasama natin si Ariel. Ariel, go ahead.
Hi, Director James. Hi, Attorney James. Oo. May tanong lang ko, with all the efforts and initiatives in voters education and all these surveys, surfacing kung ano yung gusto ng mga tao sa isang kandidato. At this point in time, sa tingin nyo, with the presence of our sociologist here, ano kailangan natin i-focus in terms of voter education this time?
Sa tingin ko po, ang kailangan talaga natin i-focus, and that's what we're doing now, is to focus on the relationship between your who you voted for and the quality of governance you receive. No? Because dito sa pandemya, naging issue ng gut ito eh. Basically, what we're saying now is that you vote or die. Because literally, ganun ang nangyari sa marami nating kababayan. No? More than thousands of them have died because they were unable to access resources. They were not protected from the virus, etc. So it's a real issue now. So kung ma-focus natin doon yung pag-iisip ng tao, baka makuha natin yung kanilang cooperation.
Yeah, okay. My second question is, what about the media? What do the media have to do?
Well, I have my beef with media also. Ang media natin medyo ang media natin medyo masyadong mahilig mag-both sides, no? Kuminsan malinaw na mali yung balita, nagre-react pa rin sila as if totoo. No? In 2016, for instance, may lumabas na video na yung mga tao nagsasalita ng Maranao at may sinasabi sila, no? So yung caption said na mali daw yung nilabas ng makina doon sa voting receipt. Pero nung translate namin yung Maranao, ang sinasabi was kabaliktaran. Okay. No? Ang sinasabi talaga is that, tingnan nyo, tama yung lumabas sa resibo. Now, the point of that story is that when it was reported as potential evidence of fraud rather than an actual fraud being created. And then 2 days later, you still had news anchors referencing that video.
Okay.
So medyo walang discernment kuminsan yung reporting natin kasi playing to both sides nga. Diba? They're afraid of making a judgment call because sasabihan sila, ba't kayo naghuhusga, media lang kayo. And to play safe, they stick to the both sides kind of approach, which does everyone a disservice.
So we really need a lot of fact-checking during the campaigns, before the voting precincts are open, and even after the elections, right? That's what you're saying.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. Yeah. Yung emergency fact-checking na ginagawa ng COMELEC, medyo kulang na, no? Hindi na kaya. One of the things that we're working on right now is a partnership with the social network service providers, Facebook, Twitter, hopefully, that will allow us to be more responsive to fake news. We can't prevent them from being posted, but we want to make sure na we get ahead of it before it goes viral. It happened before. Kung matatandaan nyo, noong 2019, may nagpalabas ng video that seemed to show someone rifling ballots. And pinalalabas nila na fake daw yon, and we got ahead of it, said, that video was taken out of context. Ito yung buong video, ganyan-ganyan. So we were able to show it. Namatay yung storya because we got ahead of it. No? Pero hindi na kaya gawin ng COMELEC lang yon. So there has to be a partnership between COMELEC, the social media providers, and civil society.
And media organization as well, Attorney James, right?
Media organizations as well, obviously, but I'm not holding my breath kasi nga, I understand na may commercial pressures dyan.
Value.
No?
I'm not talking of a commercial news outfits like the likes of, let's say, PPI, which is an association of newspapers.
Yeah, na mga ganyan, sir.
Yeah, and JP, etc. Yeah, not the
Absolutely.
commercial platforms. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you.
Basta yung walang audience na inaalagaan.
Right. Agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
May reaction si Professor JV dun sa tinatanong ni Ariel. Yes, Professor?
Yeah,
Yes.
well, actually, yung sa reaction ko is with James, no? Kasi magandang tignan, magandang isipin that people vote based on performance and not on personality, no? That's parang ano, no? Pero sa akin sa ngayon kasi pipe dream kasi if you think about what has happened in the last 9 months or so, 8 months or so, and you still get a high approval rating for this government. There seems to be no connection between performance and approval. No? So I think ang key element to consider here would be, and I think James also mentioned this, social media. Social media has become a platform for not just people with a genuine desire to help others, no, but also those with a almost criminal intent, no, mga trolls yan who spread fake news and all that, no, which is really very difficult to monitor, even for COMELEC, even for government, no. Kaya kailangan talaga ng public education, and in terms of how we're going to use social media, no. And nasabi ko nga kanina, and nasabi rin ni Dr. Ericta kanina, no, people have a high usage of Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and so
social
on.
media.
No? But I think there is also a high level of trust at this point about whatever comes out of social media. Hindi na katulad dati na kailangan marinig mo muna sa radyo para masabi mong totoo, no? Makita mo sa TV para masabi mong totoo, or mabasa mo sa dyaryo. Ngayon makita mo lang sa Facebook, no? Totoo na 'yan, no? So it's very, very important that we are able to educate people in terms of knowing what is actually real, what's not. Now, relating to mass media kasi parang ang gimmick niyan is pagsabungin, no? Pinagsasabong yung mga points of view, whether or not one view is true or not, no? Ang importante, merong sabong na nangyayari so that you generate some kind of a conversation or a discourse. But at sometimes this doesn't really lead to tawag nito, consciousness raising, no, for the people. Parang lalo lang nababaon sa mga traditional sentiments or old habits ng mga tao. Yes.
So,
All right.
Infotainment ang tawag dyan, sir. Infotainment.
pero sorry, I beg to disagree, but I think it's not the intent of the media and journalists to make sabong, but I think it's the he said, she said, and all, leading to much confusion probably. And I think at this point, talking about for all intents and purposes, the critical or crucial role of the media is really to shed light on a lot of issues, and the truth telling is that paigtingin yon kasi ang kalaban talaga is information and misinformation. That's what PPI has been doing for the longest time since it established training programs on fighting fake news, etc. But I think we also need a lot of experts like you, sir, to, let's say, for example, shed light on surveys on what comes out, because people really media really need to laymanize technical terms. So kayo po yung magbibigay ng the human side of it, so that we're able also to get the message across.
Let's write a book, sir. Let's write a book. PPI and COMELEC.
Yes, why not?
Anyway, let me remind everyone, including our audience, this is just the first step. As
Correct.
One said, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. This is our contribution to further discuss and introduce ideas on how to make
True.
candidates. At the same time, encourage the right ones to seek public office. Yes, Professor Mario, before we
Yes.
say goodbye. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, just to join the conversation on the role of the media, not
Yeah.
only on the
Yes.
media, no, because it's now in a platform of social media. It's where young voters are going into there. But how do we evolve ourselves, for example, different organizations to become media influencer as an institution that delivers correct information? Kasi if you look at our influencers in the social media, these are individuals, no?
Yeah.
With one, hindi ko alam yung PPI kung gaano karami yung kanyang following, di ba? Yun yung kailangan na paramihin natin sa social media kasi para yung voices of truth, no, and reliable source of information ay talagang manggagaling dito rather than doon sa mga individuals who they call now as media social influencers, no. I think how do we populate ourselves? Bahagi yan siya ng 2022 campaign. I still go with the Attorney Jimenez, kailangan pa rin talaga natin mag-voters education, though it has its own limit. In 2019, I organized first-time voters, no? Estudyante, ito yung mga nag-K-12, no? Excited yung mga bata, boboto. Join in an information campaign, etc. So they went down to their barangays and etc. Then after the election, they all got frustrated.
Okay.
No, because the reality of what we're
They saw
telling
the
them, of
realities.
active citizen, then the outcome of the election and what happens in the election in front of their eyes, suddenly, saka napansin ng mga bata, grabe palang bilihan ng boto pag election, sir, no? Hindi namin napansin noon. Tumali kami nitong voters education campaign, doon namin nakita, no, na the politicians, the government employees, everybody got involved in our political fiesta. So yun yung kailangan sigurong tingnan. How do we really sustain that idealism ng mga bata? Or else, parang, wala, it becomes just a fiesta. It will happen every year, every time. Beautiful, colorful, noisy, but at the end of the day, we do not know whether it will bring good things to the lives of many of the Filipino people.
Kuya Melo, one last. No, on the idea of social media influencers. Okay. Meron lang, I don't know if how the others their take on this. Kasi merong negative connotation din yung social media influence. What I'm looking at right now in terms of voters education, etc., paigtingin yung consciousness and all, yun talang community of academics, community of other stakeholders, not just one person being called a social media influencer, pero ito yung dapat marami from the ground up. Ito yung sinasabi natin kasi ang problema ko lang doon sa pag merong social media influencers, personality based na po siya. Nakatutok lang yung tao doon. Tsaka pag sinabi niyang ito na yon, gospel truth na yon eh. As opposed to, let's say, for example, talagang a mass of critical thinkers na nagrupo o meron ng existing o wala o mabubuo pa siya even before the elections para mas mapaigting yung tinatawag natin na mahawaan, merong domino effect, etc. Yun lang naman, sir. Maraming salamat po.
Yeah.
Sorry, ang dami nating pahabol.
Okay.
One of the things that you'll notice about the American elections, whether or not you're Republican or Democrat, is that lahat ng sinasabi ng Republicans about cheating, etc., ay sinasagot hindi lamang ng Democrats who have the most to gain, but also from experts, yung academics na sinasabi ni Sir Ariel. Meron kang ibang source na pinanggagalingan ng pangbalanse ng claims ng iba. So again, without judging kung sino yung may tamang claim, the fact is, wala tayo nung pambalanse na force na yun. Wala tayong ganun. Meron lang tayo political parties who are obviously partisan, therefore they will push their own agenda and their own point of view, pero wala ka nung other group na supposedly hiwalay, pero
independent, third party.
Pero knowledgeable.
Yeah.
Knowledgeable. Yun yung importante doon eh.
Absolutely.
Sir, paano yung mga PPCRV, mga...
Yes po, yan. Pero kailangan nila ng tulong. Kasi ang PPCRV po, when they say something like, tama ang COMELEC, walang pandarayan nagaganap, guess who gets attacked afterwards in the next news cycle? PPCRV.
PPCRV.
Yeah.
Kakatakin na naman sila.
Yeah.
because they're being perceived as having been co-opted.
Yeah.
So if you have a spread out or diffuse group of people who are independently giving their assessment on whether or not a claim is true, it's harder for people to single them out and say, bayad ka, binenta mo na yung kaluluwa mo. Because wala siyang ma-point out na single entity. Hindi katulad ng PPCRB, nagiging target siya pag nagsasalita siya. And in worst case scenarios, that is a chill that will provide a chilling effect so that no one's gonna say anything anymore at the risk of becoming labeled or
Being
Be a target. Be a target.
misunderstood.
Yeah.
Oo.
Oo.
So
Targeted.
agree po ako kay Sir Ariel. Kailangan mabuo yung ganung klaseng pag-iisip, yung mass of critical thinkers who will speak up independent of both sides of the issue.
Correct.
All right. I'm sure most of you will have to prepare for lunch. It's 11:19 already.
Pero ang sarap ng kwentuhan, Kuya Melo. Part 2 pa naman, Kuya eh.
We cannot serve you lunch today, but we will do sometime in the near future. I guess. May I have your message? Well, we're winding up. What do you expect to happen within the next couple of months or years from Hans Seidel Foundation? What do you expect?
Well, in relation to the Philippines,
Yes.
I expect that we stay here, that we continue working with our Filipino partners. One of them is the PPI, and therefore our program will be based on your suggestions. So, I mean, Hans Seidel Foundation, we are not coming here to your wonderful country and pointing with a finger and saying it must be done like this and this. No, we are working together. So we are at the end, we are giving the money and we are following your advice. So that's what I expect.
Good. Yeah. Thank you very much. Bobby Elicta from Novo Trends. What do you see in the near future?
Well, when things settle down in the US elections, I expect that the candidates will start coming out.
Really?
Right now, they're still quiet.
They're still quiet. But
quiet.
some people are making their presence felt already. Some are already delivering manna from heaven.
Well, halata naman eh.
So where are we headed? You know, there will always be that search for ROI, return on investments. No? So where will they get it?
Experience shows that those who came in too early, in the end, lost out.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Professor Mario.
Yeah, I think the coming 2022 elections will definitely be starting soon, probably by January to March. You know, everybody's positioning themselves. It will be a challenge to politicians, definitely. There will be new tactics and strategies they have to do because COVID is still here. No? And I think they will ride on the COVID thing to insert the political agenda they have in the campaigning. It will be a big fiesta still. And I see that the 2022 election is a very contested election. No, I am not sure whether it will be a violent one. Though others, I think, will continue to do an advocacy actually and counting. Sana lumala yung COVID para ma-postpone yung election.
Oh my God.
Maraming nag-iisip ng ganun eh. Kasi hindi nila ma-imagine may COVID ka, gumasto na sila, tapos may election ka pa, gagasto pa uli sila. No?
Okay.
Kaya malakas yung resonance na yan, no? Whether it's in ARMM or even in the national. I talk with so many politicians, they say, you know, may crisis naman tayo, bakit pa tayo mag-i-election? Dinaanan ka pa ng bagyo, and etc. No?
Okay.
Pero I always tell you, don't postpone democracy. No? Malabo na nga yung demokrasya natin, pinupostpone pa natin.
Would you rather have the date for filing of certificates of candidacy moved from October to January of the next year para makaiwas sa Pasko at bagong taon?
Pupunta pa rin sila.
Sa Kwan kasi, it doesn't matter in many of the politicians actually in the local. Remember, as Attorney Jimenez have mentioned, campaigning have already started prior to the filing of the candidacy. So whether you move it or not, whether may Pasko o wala, they are obliged anyway to send something to their constituents dahil papasok na yung election. So it doesn't matter much yung postponement of the filing of, parang ito lang yung compliance lang siya, pero yung substance ginagawa na nila early pa.
Yeah, I remember there are places like in Sorsogon City, merong as early as 5 o'clock, umiikot na sa bahay-bahay ng kandidato at kumakatok. At nagsasabi, bakit kayo nagsimba? Natagalan tuloy kami paghihintay.
Ano ba yan?
Anyway, yes, Professor J.V. Tigno, it's a pleasure to have you with us. What are your thoughts about the coming days?
Thank you for having me. Itong taon na ito, 2020, is actually, the way I see it, it's a performance test for our elected officials.
Ito ang Oragon Internet Television, maaasahan sa balanced news in public affairs, education, music and information, gamit ang makabagong teknolohiya sa pamamahayag, maaasahan sa katotohanan, kaagapay ng mamamayan, sa pagkikipag-ugnayan sa pamahalaan. Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now conclude another day of broadcasting activities. You have been watching to this virtual broadcast station, Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting, a commercial non-stop virtual broadcast station through Facebook and YouTube. Registered with business name number 1909782 by the Department of Trade and Industry, and authorizing to operate until July 2, 2025. Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting is now signing off.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiliw, pero sa silanganan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang bihirang, kuya ka ng magiting, sa manluluping, di ka pasisingil, sa nagatang tutok sa simoy at sa langit mo pagaw, ay hinatang tulad, awit sa pagkayang minamahal, ang isang ng matawag mo'y tagumpay na nagtitigil, ang pituwin at araw